My daughter slammed down a paper showing her husband owed a whopping $500,000, giving me a sharp, "I need the money by tomorrow." She didn't forget to throw in "and don't be late." I chuckled, trying to ease the tension. All right, all right. A few hours later, I was at the airport. The plan was on, but when they showed up to grab the cash, things took a twist. There was only a locked door and a cryptic box waiting for them. Inside, a note read, "Betray, revenge, justice. It begins." The doorbell chimed, first a casual ring, then more insistent. I was nursing a glass of bourbon and wading through quarterly reports, but knew exactly who stood outside. Through my study window, Emily's white Tesla gleamed under the exterior lights. When Emily showed up on a whim, it was usually for money. As I wandered past family photos in our grand foyer, they felt oddly foreign, almost like they belonged in someone else's life. Emily at 5, flashing a toothy grin, at 18, poised to take on the world in her graduation gown. At 28, her wedding day all captured in those captured in frames. Memories that now seemed to tease me. There she stood, with that smile of hers. It never quite sparkled in her eyes anymore. Brandon lingered in the background, his eyes glued to his phone like it held the stock market secrets. Neither seemed overjoyed to be here. "Daddy?" Emily said, hugging me a smidge too long. The hug felt transactional, storing some emotional negotiable for later. Brandon slunk by without a word, the sound of his designer shoes sharp on the floor as he homed in on my leather chair, my chair. Following them into the living room, I noticed Emily fidgeting with her high-end bag, a $5,000 gift from last year. Brandon had already claimed space on the coffee table, laying out papers as if convening a pop-up board meeting. Emily perched on the edge of the couch, her fingers playing with the pearl necklace from her 30th birthday, something she always did when she wanted something. "Do you need anything? Water? Wine?" I threw the offer out there, half-heartedly. Brandon cut to the chase, scanning his phone. "Let's get straight to it, Rob." Not Robert, not Mr. Mitchell, just Rob. My grip on the bourbon tightened as I silently counted down from 10, trying to rein in my frustration. Emily's voice had that tight edge it always did in tight spots. "Daddy, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. Family first, right?" she implored. I looked her square in the eye, trying not to let my growing annoyance show. "So, what's the story with the property in Round Rock?" Brandon looked at me like I was speaking another language. "Market ups and downs, a minor hiccup. But that's not why we're here." He brushed it off. Emily twisted her wedding ring, a family heirloom, my mother's. This was her nervous tick, a habit dating back to when she fibbed about breaking our old china dish at 12. "Thing is," she started, hesitated, then blurted out, "Brandon's hedge is on a new startup. It's groundbreaking." I interrupted. "How much?" The clock ticked in the awkward silence. Brandon's expensive cologne mixed with the bourbon's oak scent, and Emily's heel tapped a nervous rhythm. "It shouldn't be much for someone like you," chimed Brandon, getting a bit too comfortable in my chair. "500,000, needed in our account by noon tomorrow." The room swirled slightly as my usual migraine began its routine dance behind my eye. $500,000 wasn't just a simple favor. It's not like ordering takeout, more like a monumental demand. No 50 grand, not even 100 grand. I tried to find words, hesitated. Memories flashed. Teaching Emily to ride her bike in Zilker Park, her graduation from UT, escorting her down the aisle. Was that joyful little girl real, or just my hopeful imagination? "Dad, we wouldn't be coming to you if we had another choice," Emily said, moving her hands from her pearl necklace to dab at her eyes, though I didn't spot any tears. She started off about the mortgage. Have you noticed how insanely expensive kids' schools are these days? Because I sure have, since I'm the one shelling out the money. It's 15 grand per kid each semester at St. Andrews. Plus, there's their mortgage for the house in Westlake, where I chipped in $200,000 as a so-called one-time deal 3 years back. Then there's Brandon. He got up casually and poured himself a generous glass of my prized 25-year-old Macallan without a second thought. "We're not dealing with your run-of-the-mill bankers here, Rob," he mentioned. "These are some serious folks. I'd hate for this to mess up your reputation at the country club or with the dealers." His words were loaded, creating a tension in the room you could practically slice through, not to mention the overwhelming scent of his cologne. My blood pressure shot up, and a monstrous headache started pounding from behind my eye, spanning across my head. Feeling dizzy, I had to steady myself by holding onto the mantel. "Dad, you don't look too good," Emily observed, not with concern, but like she was gauging how weakened I was, looking for leverage. Then she hit me with the big one. "If Mom were still around, she'd be disappointed with how you're treating us." Her words sliced through the air like a sharp blade. Emily knew exactly what buttons to push. Even though Margaret and I had called it quits a decade ago, Emily often pulled out her mother's memory as a trump card when it suited her. Never mind that Margaret is happily living in Houston with her new partner now. Never mind that she warned me about Emily's knack for twisting situations. In Emily's version of history, Margaret wouldn't have hesitated to hand over money. I said calmly, "Your mother would have told you too to get jobs." Brandon, still perched at the bar, chuckled and held up my scotch as if it were rightfully his. "Jobs? I'm an entrepreneur, Rob. I make jobs," he laughed. Quite ironic, given his track record of 3 failed startups in the past 5 years, and how I cautioned him about that crypto disaster he ventured into last Christmas. He even ran a consulting firm that didn't consult anyone. I funded them all, watching each crash and burn while Brandon chased after his pipe dreams. Emily shifted tactics, her voice wobbling as if hurt. "You missed Sophie's recital last month," she pointed out, "and Max's soccer tournament. But those quarterly reports always get your attention. Reports, I might add, that kept their kids in those pricey schools, their Tesla in tip-top shape, and their luxurious Westlake home. But I didn't bring that up. Instead, I watched as her mascara began to form 2 perfect streaks down her cheeks, like she'd perfected this performance. I composed myself and asked, "So let me get this straight. You need $500,000 by noon tomorrow? Care to explain why?" Brandon and Emily exchanged a knowing look, that unspoken language couples speak when they're in cahoots. Brandon set my scotch down and arranged some papers on the table like he was setting up a card game. "It's a real estate shot," he explained. "If we don't move fast, we'll lose it." "But didn't you tell me you took a hit in real estate in Round Rock?" I reminded him. "That's different," Brendan insisted, clutching a piece of paper so tightly his knuckles were white. "This is crypto-related." It was a minor but telling slip-up, recalling how they'd lost $200,000 in a similar escapade just 8 months ago. My left hand started to tremble, a new surprise brought by my 60s, so I stuffed it into my pocket. Emily's phone buzzed, and she quickly shot off a message before setting it down. "Dad, we've stood by you through so much," she reminded me. "When you and Mom split, who was there? When the economy tanked in 2020, who helped you keep the dealerships running? You were relaxing in Cabo that summer," I countered, documenting every step on Instagram. "That's not fair," she snapped. Trying to keep my cool despite my rising anger, I started listing off. Your wedding, $100,000. House down payment, $200,000. Brandon's first business, $150,000. The next, $80,000. The third, that's ancient news, Brandon cut in, standing to his full height, attempting to loom over me. We're talking about what's ahead for us, the future of your grandkids, Emily said with a hint of urgency. She was referring to those very grandkids I was shelling out cash for at St. Andrews. With her phone clutched tightly, Emily stood up. She had an old SeaWorld pic from when she was 7, using it like a prop to bolster her case. Brandon, stepping in closer, revealed a tiny scar above his brow. "Rob, this isn't just about some bills," he noted seriously. "It's about obligations, important ones, with important people. Tomorrow by lunchtime, you've got to get it sorted or we're all in trouble. Your reputation, the car businesses, your exclusive country club perks, they're all at stake." "Are you seriously trying to threaten me in my own home?" I whispered, keeping my voice low. Emily struggled to keep a brave face, her voice shaky. She had never witnessed me this infuriated, yet incredibly composed. "Please, Daddy, we have to handle this by tomorrow noon. No negotiations," she pleaded. The air felt thick, despite the air conditioning. My head pounded along with my heartbeat, and Brandon's overpowering cologne was almost sickening. Emily's perfectly timed tears had turned her eyeliner into a muddled mess. I took a good look at them both. My once sweet daughter seemed so different now, and her husband a blatant opportunist. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times. Outside, the peaceful Austin suburbs continued their evening, completely oblivious to the storm inside my living room. "All right." The word came out sounding completely drained and hollow. "Tomorrow. Now go." Emily misread my fatigue as acceptance. She rushed over, arms open for a hug, but I stepped back, making her drop them. Brandon offered a handshake, his grip unnecessarily tight, as if to prove something he hadn't earned. "We knew you'd come around," Emily said, putting away her expensive bag and holding a picture, probably staged. "Family first, right, Daddy?" They left without another word, Brandon guiding Emily like she'd just become his latest trophy. I watched from the doorway until their Tesla disappeared down the road onto Westlake Drive. 5 minutes later, I made the first phone call. James Walker, ever dependable, picked up right away even at that hour. We had been friends and legal confidants for 25 years. He knew a late call from me was a red flag. "So they finally crossed a line, huh?" he replied, not surprised, more resigned. "They're demanding it by noon tomorrow like I'm nothing but a walking ATM, I vented. "They've reached the brink." James reassured me the paperwork to transfer the house was already underway. "They don't realize it yet, remember?" James continued. "Emily never had her name on that deed. You insisted it was in your name when you covered the down payment." "What about Margaret?" I wondered aloud, moving through the house that no longer felt like home. "She's waiting to hear from you. Says it's high time you stopped letting them walk all over you." I ended the call and made my way to my office. My mind cleared, the pounding headache giving way to a steely focus. On my laptop was an email from a few weeks back. Confirmation for Villa Las Palmas in Costa Rica, March 17th to April 17th. Originally for retirement, now serving a much different purpose. I phoned American Airlines and swiftly navigated their automated service. The morning flight was rebooked for 6:45 a.m., first class open, just for me. The safe unlocked with a code only I knew. Emily never had it. Inside were meticulously labeled folders documenting 2 decades of financials. Every check, wire transfer, and loan was filed away. Brandon's signature was there too, dated December 2023, vowing it would be the last ask. Emily's Instagram glory from the past year was printed, each escapade dated. Their cries of financial ruin didn't match the snapshots. Shopping sprees, luxurious dinners, trips to Napa. I fetched an old Amazon box from the garage, plain and unassuming. Inside, I arranged 3 sets of papers. First, the deed to their home. Second, a detailed loan history. $847,000 amassed over 8 years, plain as day. Third, the legal documents James had drawn up long ago, which we hoped to avoid using. At the bottom of the box was a USB drive with security footage from that evening. The cameras I'd installed after a break-in 2 years back had captured everything. Emily's calculated tears, Brandon's threats, their joint operation. So get this. I left behind one note. You wanted the future, right? Well, here's what you're actually in for. Packed up everything in just half an hour. 2 suitcases stuffed with summer clothes, must-have documents, and meds. That's it. Now, Jake, who ran the car dealership, catches a brief email on his screen. Family crisis. You're in charge. More info soon. He was standing in the hallway, staring at an old family pic from 5 years back at Laguna Gloria. Back then, Emily looked genuinely happy, or Jake liked to believe so. He took the picture down, turned it around, and hung it back. Somehow, the blank side felt more honest. In his room, Jake slid off his University of Texas class ring, the same one Emily used to twirl around when she was younger, dreaming about owning it someday. He dropped it into a box he was packing. His pounding headache had faded, replaced by a feeling that seemed more like anticipation. He checked his phone, 3 messages from Emily. He deleted them without a second thought. Brandon had called twice, probably to nag about tomorrow's deadline. Jake figured those voicemails could just collect dust. He decided instead to call Margaret, who lived in Houston. She picked up right away like she was expecting the call. Robert James called. Is this for real? She questioned. Should have done it ages ago, Jake replied. She's our daughter, Margaret said gently without blame. But she's not who we raised, is she? No, she's not, Jake sighed. Head to the place in Costa Rica. You'll be safe there. Just think of it as a very extended vacation. Jake can manage the dealerships, and the lawyers will handle everything else. There was a pause. Then Margaret said, You know she'll try to find you. She can try, Jake replied coolly. By the time Emily figured out what was actually in the box, Jake imagined sipping coffee on some beach, pondering whether he'd ever come back. They hung up without warm farewells. Margaret seemed to see what Emily had become, perhaps quicker than Jake did. Moms just have that 6th sense. Later, around 11:30 at night, Jake found himself in the shadowy kitchen, drinking water and staring at the fridge covered in his grandkids' drawings. One showed stick figures labeled Grandpa and Me fishing at Lake Travis. Another was a colorful sketch of his dealership labeled Grandpa's Work. He carefully took the fishing drawing, folded it, and tucked it into his wallet. His grandkids weren't responsible for their parents' bad choices. Jake placed the box on the table by the porch, making sure it couldn't be overlooked. The doorbell camera was ready to catch their reactions at noon, when they expected a check, but would instead find their illusions shattered. His alarm was set for 4:30 a.m., just 6 hours before his new journey began, and only 6.5 until theirs fell apart. The alarm blared at 4:30 in the morning. No snooze button, no putting it off. Decades of early dealership meetings had honed Jake's knack for waking up on the dot. Today, it was for a whole new reason. The coffee machine buzzed to life, having been prepped the night before. Colombian dark roast, the kind Emily always complained was too strong when she'd stop by for breakfast. The warmth of the mug, an anniversary gift she'd given 10 years earlier, was grounding. Outside the kitchen window, the Austin skyline began to wake up. Office lights flickered on one by one, while most of the city still slept. Jake moved through his home with deliberate care, almost like piecing through a mystery. The portrait of Margaret's mother still graced the master bedroom, a piece Emily always wanted, but never asked nicely enough to get. Her old childhood room, now an office, still flaunted her high school awards, state debate champ, National Honor Society, a stark contrast to the person demanding money just 12 hours ago. The pool area seemed so peaceful in the early morning light. It was where Jake had taught Emily to swim, recalling her fearless splashes at age 4. Just last July, Brandon had drunkenly fallen into the pool during a 4th of July barbecue and blamed Jake for where the pool was placed. Yet Jake still forked over money for Brandon's ruined designer watch. In the garage, the Bentley's engine purred to life, and he chose it over the Tesla. It brought back too many memories, mostly tied to Brandon. As he drove through the quiet streets of Westlake Hills, only the hum of garbage trucks interrupted the silence. Passing by Emily's darkened house, he figured they were dreaming up ways to spend his money. Classic rock played through the speakers, the Eagles singing "Take It Easy," and Jake chuckled at the irony as he approached the intersection at Bee Cave and Walsh. So I was cruising down Mopac, pondering whether I should ring Margaret, but decided a chat with James would be better. The highway was pretty empty, and when I passed 3 of my car dealerships, I thought about how they'd soon belong to Jake. My picture still hung in the lobby of the main dealership. That needed to change. Coming up on 5th Street, I noticed the Velvet Room, Brandon's usual spot to meet his gambling buddies. That's where the trouble started. Construction on Congress forced me to detour through 2nd Street. As I drove, the city basked in early morning light, felt like a stage for a play I wouldn't be part of anymore. James's office was on the 42nd floor of the Frostbank Tower. It was 5:30 a.m., and the place was mostly deserted except for security and a few early birds. In the conference room, James was ready with his paralegal, Sophia Chen. A table between them was piled with documents like a military operation. Right in the middle was a box of Krispy Kreme donuts, a tradition for sealing big deals since '99. "You look surprisingly well rested," James remarked, sliding some documents my way. For the first time in a while, I actually had a good night's sleep. I signed the power of attorney with my dad's old fountain pen, a secret Emily never knew. It was restricted, just for 60 days, covering property transfers and financial restructuring. "Can't have you selling her organs now," James joked, though neither of us felt much like laughing. We both knew this was necessary, not punishment. Sophia handed me some property papers with her usual efficiency. "What's interesting, Mr. Mitchell, is the timing," she noted. "The transfer was recorded yesterday at 4 p.m., 3 hours before they even showed up at my place." Emily's house, which she loved to flaunt on Instagram, hadn't been hers since 2020. She never bothered to read past the 2nd page. It was ironic. She stormed into my place asking for money, clueless she'd already lost her biggest claim. "And the financial lockdown?" I queried. "Locked down by midnight. Joint accounts are frozen, and credit cards in your name are on hold. But the kids' tuition is paid up till December. They're not part of this," James reassured me. Then he handed me a bulky folder we called the nuclear option. Inside were transcripts of Emily's texts to her friends, calling me a walking ATM, and Brandon's 2023 IOU, claiming it was his last. Plus, a USB drive with last night's security footage of their whole act. Brandon signed a prenup with a hidden gambling clause his tipsy lawyer had missed. Sophia looked a bit uncomfortable. "Mr. Mitchell, this covers everything," she remarked. "5 years of planning," I said. "I always hoped it wouldn't get to this." James revealed another Amazon box, identical to the one on my porch. "Insurance?" I asked. "If she doesn't pick yours up, this goes to her work on Monday, with these too." James handed me photos of Brandon at the casino last week, complete with timestamps and losses. "Does Margaret know?" I asked. "She's been aware for months, helped document everything. She's tired of enabling Emily too," James replied. The Costa Rican property, bought through a Cayman's shell, was secure. Even if Emily got litigious, she couldn't touch it. I signed the final document, terminating Emily's trust fund, and my hand was a bit shaky. 20 years planning her future, undone with a single signature. James noticed my hesitation. "Bourbon?" he offered, nodding to his desk drawer. No, I've got a flight, I replied. At exactly 6 a.m. I stood, shaking James's hand. His grip was firm, full of understanding and determination. When the elevator was taking me down, every floor I passed seemed like I was leaving behind more of my past. Outside, the valet already had my Bentley waiting. I gave him $100 tip and an envelope and told him, Jake Martinez is coming on Monday to pick this up. He looked a bit confused, but kept it professional. As I headed towards the airport, the sun began its climb, painting Austin's skyline with a warm, golden light. My phone lit up with a call. It was Emily, earlier than I thought she'd ring. That was a sound I hadn't heard in a while, until now. As I cruised down Highway 71 towards Austin Bergstrom International, the sun rose, spilling gold and copper over the rolling hills. I knew the road like the back of my hand, but today it felt like I was saying goodbye to every familiar landmark. Passing Manuel's taco truck at the Riverside intersection, where I'd usually grab breakfast tacos, I thought, not this morning. The radio hummed along with NPR chatting about a local businessman with grand plans. Ironically, they were discussing my car dealerships, soon to be someone else's concern. Emily called 3 times in quick succession, then Brandon once. Each ring felt like counting down. Years back, I'd have dived to answer, worried about the grandkids. Now, hearing that ringtone just reminded me of how much they thought they were owed. Merging onto 183, I took stock of things. Jake had Saturdays covered for 5 years. He'd be fine. The property managers had their instructions and enough funds for 6 months. The grandkids' school fees would be taken care of until December. Why should they pay for their parents' slip-ups? Anything more? Not on my plate anymore. As dawn cracked, I spotted the airport south terminal appearing through the morning mist. The valet area was eerily quiet, just a couple of staff getting ready for the day. Tommy, who's parked my car countless times, looked surprised. "Flying out early, Mr. Mitchell?" he asked. "Change of plans," I said, handing him my keys and an envelope. "Jake Martinez will pick this up on Monday. His info's in there." "Everything all right?" Tommy wondered. "Never been better," I replied, without looking back at the Bentley. It had its share of tales, from Emily's wedding to Brandon's endless bar hops and my ATM runs. They can decide what happens to it next. At the first-class check-in, the place was peaceful except for Michelle, who'd checked me in more times than I could remember. "Heading to Costa Rica today, Mr. Mitchell? You're on the 6:45 to San Jose," she said. "That's the one." We played it casual, like any other day, though my world was flipping upside down. 2 bags were checked. That was all I needed. Michelle tagged them like the pro she is. I carried a small bag, important documents, medicine, laptop, and some photos I couldn't leave behind. After she gave back my passport, I slid her a sealed envelope. "Need a favor, Michelle. Someone might come looking for this. Her name's Emily Carter. She could be upset." Ever the professional, Michelle asked, "Any instructions?" "Just check her ID. There's a key to a storage unit in there. She'll get it." Or maybe she won't. The unit? Full of 2 decades of her stuff, things she never thought to claim. Let her decide if mementos matter more than money. The TSA pre-check was easy on that Saturday morning. The agents gave their usual nods. "Heading where today, Mr. Mitchell?" "Someplace warm." "For business or fun?" "Neither. Personal." Shoes off, belt in the tray. The same old airport drill, but it felt surreal amidst the deliberate unraveling of my life. Gathered my things, tucked them into pockets, but the phone stayed off. When I reached Gate 14, there was Austin Java as usual, and without thinking much, I placed my order with the barista named Kelly. She cheerfully asked, "The usual medium dark roast?" I decided to switch it up today and said, "Make it a large. Feeling a bit fancy today." Celebrating something? She inquired. You could say that. Sitting there, with the coffee warming my hands, reminded me of being at home earlier with my favorite mug. I switched on my phone for what would be the last time. There were 7 missed calls from Emily, 3 from Brandon, a barrage of texts, and 2 voicemails. But Emily's latest text hit me. Dad, call me back, having weird dreams about money. I considered replying, thought about writing. Dreams clash with reality, then tried, check the porch, but deleted those. I typed, ask James Walker, erased that too. I ended up turning off the phone, pulled out the SIM card, and chucked them both into a nearby trash bin. Let someone else figure out the drama from that investment phone. Flight 447 to San Jose, Costa Rica now boarding, came over the loudspeaker. As I handed my boarding pass to the smiling gate agent, the boarding bridge seemed to become lighter as I moved along it. I took my seat at C2A by the window. An early glass of champagne felt appropriate at this odd hour of 7 a.m. The morning seemed just right. As passengers filed in, I saw a couple of newlyweds laughing and touching, and it took me back to when Margaret and I once were like that, back 35 years ago. There was also a business traveler quickly typing away on his laptop, likely under some tight deadline. It reminded me of my own hustle to build a stable life for my daughter, who sees things in numbers and codes. An older lady settled into seat 3C, her knitting needles and yellow yarn in hand, bringing thoughts of Emily's grandmother before arthritis stole her dexterity. All of a sudden, I was caught off guard by a familiar voice. Margaret was there, standing right in the aisle, carrying her elegant luggage, looking put together just as she did when we parted ways during the divorce years ago. She found her seat in 2B, close enough for conversation but with clear boundaries from a decade back. She broke the silence with, "James called. Thought you might need some support." I responded, "This isn't your issue anymore. It's not been for 10 years. She's still my daughter too," she insisted. "Somebody should be there when she lands." Margaret then mentioned, "I purchased the condo next door 6 months ago." Evidently, James had done his homework, found the place, negotiated the price, and sorted the finer details. It seemed Margaret was as calculated in her next move as I was. Right then, the captain interrupted our moment, letting us know there'd be a small delay for a final passenger. My heart jumped. It could be Emily catching on to our plan, or maybe her husband, Brandon. But when the door opened, it was just a businessman hurrying over to his seat in the economy section. "Did you tell her?" I asked Margaret. "Tell her what?" she shot back. "That her dad's finally stopped bailing her out? That her husband's not what he seems? That she's become what we feared? No, Robert. She'll figure it out herself today." As the aircraft door closed with a firm hiss, it was already past 7 a.m. By 7:15 a.m., the engines roared, pressing me back against a seat free from any trace of Brandon's cologne or Emily's perfume. Austin quickly diminished below us, its hills and lakes becoming mere shapes. Somewhere in that city, Emily's alarm would be ringing. Within 4 hours, she'd be standing in my house only to find it empty, and an hour after that, she'd come across the box waiting for her. Within 6 hours, my old life would be dismantled beyond recognition. A flight attendant came by with the breakfast options and questioned, "Business or pleasure?" I considered it, and finally answered, "Neither. It's about doing what's right." At that, Margaret burst into genuine laughter, the first time I'd heard her truly laugh in a long time. "Welcome back," she said. "That's the Robert I married." Below us, Texas vanished into a sea of clouds. When noon came, and Emily would be anticipating another $500,000 deposited into her account, I would be cruising above the Caribbean, having lunch with Margaret at my side, finally liberated from the daughter we held dear, but lost well before the money ran dry. I found out what happened next in the usual way whenever it involved Emily. Through gossip, videos, and first-hand stories. It was like being a dad who had no choice but to watch his kid's life play out like some kind of endless documentary. James emailed me the security footage 3 days later, and I opened it on my laptop while chilling on a balcony in Costa Rica, with the gentle waves of the Pacific Ocean as the odd backdrop to the mess involving my daughter. The footage showed it was exactly noon when I got a text saying, "Your transaction is complete," signaling from James that the house had been officially sold. Meanwhile, I was probably ordering some ceviche, while Emily was likely just waking up from last night's party, sponsored once again by my final loan. Sticking to her usual Saturday morning routine, which James always tracked, Emily had left the house by 11:30 a.m. She got herself a pricey $7 latte at 11:47 a.m., bought with my credit card that I canceled at midnight, her last big spend before the charges hit my account on Monday. Mrs. Chen, our neighbor of 15 years, had a fresh take on things. She gave James a call at 12:15 p.m., speaking with crisp English that remained unchanged despite 40 years in Texas. "Mr. Walker, they're here. Emily and that gambling guy. They don't even notice I'm watching them," she reported. The cameras captured the moment at 12:15 and a half when Emily's white Mercedes glided into my driveway with the boldness of someone about to cash in what they believed they were owed. Brandon, busy on his phone, as later confirmed by James, was likely checking basketball scores to plan his next bet, using what once was my money. Emily swiped on some red lipstick in the side mirror, exactly the same shade she wore when asking for her first car at 16, the down payment for her wedding at 28, and just yesterday, a demand for $500,000 at 35. They headed to my front door acting like they owned the place. Next to me was an empty Hermes briefcase, one of those that goes for around $12,000, bought with a loan back in January. It just sat there, waiting for cash that was never going to come. At exactly 12:16 and 45 seconds, Emily rang the doorbell. This time, it was a regular ring, unlike the frantic triple press from before. She waited precisely 10 seconds, just as I expected, and rang again, holding her finger on the bell for longer. Brandon pressed his hands against the window, trying to see inside my empty kitchen. "His car's not here," Emily said out loud, making sure Mrs. Chen, who was out in her garden, heard her. "So what? He's got 5 cars," Brandon said dismissively, his voice ringing out across the yard. Emily had noticed the lights were on timers, something I set up weeks ago. "Maybe he went to the bank for cash. You said we'd meet at noon. It's just past that time." They tried to unlock the door at 12:18, but Emily's keys scratched around without luck. James's paralegal had changed the locks at 7 a.m., 3 hours before I flew out. Seeing the confusion on Emily's face was almost rewarding after all the manipulation over the years. Brandon noticed a package at 12:20:30, just an ordinary Amazon box on the porch table, except it had Emily's name scribbled on it in black Sharpie. Emily opened it easily, probably thinking it was a late birthday gift or some apology. But the first thing she pulled out was the house deed. Her expression went through confusion to disbelief to horror in what felt like a split second, like watching fruit go bad in a fast-forward video. She dropped the paper, and Brandon snatched it before it hit the ground. "But what do you mean it's in his name?" he asked, loudly enough for Mrs. Chen to catch. Next, Emily found a spreadsheet documenting every payment, every loan, every gift, all meticulously recorded. It added up to $1.3 million over 8 years, not even counting the house. Her hands shook as she read down to the final line. Then she saw photos of Brandon blowing money at the Palms Casino just last Tuesday, captured with timestamps that laid out his losses clearly. There was also the promissory note he had signed, claiming December's money would be the last he'd ever request. Emily's text messages were printed and highlighted too, where she told her friends things like, "Dad's too pathetic to say no," and "I deserve this money more than he does." At exactly 12:23 and 17 seconds, Emily's phone started buzzing. It all started with one credit card being declined, then another, and yet another. Cards from Chase, American Express, and Nordstrom, all tied to my name, were canceled right at midnight, while she was still fast asleep. Around 12:24, Brandon was reaching out to someone over the phone, only for James to later figure out it was his bookie on the line. The bookie laid it out. Credit extensions come with the need for collateral, not just empty promises. Emily collapsed onto my porch steps, her fancy dress all wrinkled up against the concrete I had nicely resurfaced last summer. At precisely 12:25 and 44 seconds, she stumbled upon a USB drive, plugged it shakily into her phone, and heard her voice ring out, clear as day, saying, "Just take whatever he gives you. He's too pathetic to say no." Not long after, Brandon's voice joined in, warning, "These aren't bank people, Rob. They're serious." The last punch was a prenup, with page 47 marked up in yellow and a note circled in red about the gambling addiction part. The agreement was clear. If gambling debts went over $50,000, marital assets would be gone immediately, a line Brandon had crossed 3 years back. By 12:27 and 31 seconds, Brandon hurled his briefcase at my door in anger. The impact busted the handle, scattering pieces of luxurious Hermes leather everywhere on the porch. You could hear Emily's cries in the background, definitely not the tidy tears from the day before, but the raw sobs of someone who realized they lost the game they were playing. At 12:28, Mrs. Chen made her entrance, every inch of her 4'11" frame holding a phone like it was a weapon. "I'm calling the cops if you don't leave," she asserted firmly. Emily yelled back, "This is my dad's house," her face a masterpiece of mascara. Mrs. Chen countered, "Not anymore. Mr. Mitchell sent over the property transfer notice this morning. You're trespassing." Brandon stormed off to the car as the clock showed 12:30, leaving Emily to gather the scattered remnants of what used to be her wealth. She left some papers behind, which the wind soon carried off. Brandon drove off, leaving tire marks on the driveway, a cost the property manager would add to their bill. At exactly 12:30 and 45 seconds, just as Emily understood her fortune had slipped away, I was seated at a beachside restaurant, watching the ocean waves roll in. A waiter approached, asking with a charming accent if I was marking a special occasion. "A graduation?" he guessed. I gave him a smile and said, "Yes, mine." Come Monday, James delivered the final piece of info. Emily had shown up on Sunday morning with a locksmith who refused to help her once he confirmed who owned the place. She then tried climbing over the fence until the security crew appeared. The police gave her a trespass warning. Brandon was gone. It seemed he had headed to his brother's place over in Dallas, and the divorce papers were already underway. A few days later, as I relaxed on my balcony with Margaret beside me perusing a book, James asked if I was interested in watching the full video. I shook my head, focused on the pelicans diving in for dinner. The chaos that had dominated my life for 5 long years was now blessedly silent. 3 days went by, and James sent over clips from the parking garage. Sitting on my deck in Costa Rica, I watched as my daughter's world unraveled on the laptop with pelicans in the backdrop. In the footage, the time read 7 p.m. on March 16th, right around when I was having what was probably my first calm dinner in ages. Their Mercedes screeched into the underground lot of Emily's condo. Even with no sound, Brandon's angry gestures were unmistakable. He slammed the car door so hard that the alarm blared, lights flashing like a distress signal ignored by all. Emily ran after him to the elevator, clutching those papers like crucial evidence from a crime scene, which, in a sense, they were, signs of their shattered dreams. James's paralegals had somehow grabbed the building's elevator audio, capturing their raw exchange in detail. Emily's voice was sharp with betrayal. "You said it was commercial real estate." "It was," Brandon snapped back, his denial a frantic scramble. The casino was just stress relief. He repeated that phrase over and over. Stress relief. The sound of paper hitting skin, then the elevator's gentle ding, doors shutting on Emily's heartbreaking sobs. So, by 7:30 in the evening, Emily was going all out live on Instagram, creating a scene that soon turned legendary among the Austin elite. James and his crew were quick on the draw, capturing screenshots before Emily could hit delete. Fast forward a bit, and there she was on the screen, her makeup smudged into a mess resembling modern art, holding a wine glass with trembles running up her manicured hand. "When someone you trust breaks your heart," she cried, waving the house deed like a flag for everyone to see, while in the background, Brandon was madly chucking clothes into a suitcase. "Living a life built on lies," she yelled, and hurled the wine glass at their wedding photo, ending the stream with a crash. 47 people saw Westlake's socialite queen Emily Carter falling to pieces right before their eyes. Among them were 3 of my dealership guys, who immediately shared the shocking footage with James. Come Monday morning, Brandon's mom left a heartfelt voicemail at my office, neatly stored by James. "Mr. Mitchell, Brandon's been missing since Saturday night. Emily's saying you snatched him." Her voice was dripping with a mother's worry. "I know it sounds absurd, but do you have any clue where he might be?" I didn't know exactly, but I had an idea of his whereabouts. As those late hours ticked by, Brandon was busy calling anyone with money to their name. Country club pals, old college chums, heck, even his ex's dad. Each call shorter and more frantic than the last. His mother caught him barely holding it together in one call. "It's not just about cash anymore. These folks mean business." Between 8:30 and 10 p.m., Emily was diving deep into the legal labyrinth of Google, her search history like a roadmap through denial, all happening on my Amazon account's Wi-Fi. Can father take back Gift House, Texas? How to break power of attorney. Statute limitations financial gifts, Texas. Emergency bankruptcy lawyer, Austin. Can casino debts affect spouse, Texas? Cheap divorce attorney, no money down. The search about divorce attorneys hit harder than expected. Not because I wanted to keep the marriage, but because she expected someone else to foot the bill for it. Rachel, one of Emily's college friends, called up Margaret around 10 that night. Emily had finally viewed the whole USB, and not just their flimsy summaries from the day before. It contained 5 years' worth of family events, birthdays, holidays, all secretly recorded. There was Emily, calling me an ATM during her 30th birthday bash. Brandon joking about milking the old man dry at Thanksgiving. Emily coaching Brandon on manipulation tactics before our anniversary dinner. And the Christmas toast mocking dear old dad, the family bank. She watched it 3 times. Rachel shared it with Margaret in a state of disbelief. Then, starting at 10:17 p.m., declined credit card alerts began rolling in, each one picked up by James's nifty system. Chase Sapphire card declined. American Express Platinum suspended. Nordstrom, no-go. Even her Starbucks card was no longer in play. The next day, a DoorDash driver had some choice words. Emily had tried ordering $200 of sushi, planning to pay cash, except their bank was empty. The driver was not having it and threatened a small claims showdown while Brandon was out pawning her jewelry. Between 11 p.m. and midnight, Emily's Facebook posts lit up Austin's gossip circles. She deleted them fast, but not fast enough to stop the screenshot brigade. "Family betrayal," she wrote. "When your dad chooses money over family. Any good employment lawyers? Selling designer bags? Only serious buyers?" She wasn't ready for the flood of comments. Her cousin popped up saying, "Weren't you in Cabo just last week?" A high school friend added, "Didn't your dad bankroll all of that?" And a former coworker said, "Aren't you the one who quit her job after the wedding?" But as Emily's life spiraled out of control, Margaret and I were chilling on a beach deck, playing poker. A guitarist was playing nearby, and I slipped him $100 to play Take It Easy by the Eagles. Margaret let out a laugh, a real, hearty laugh, the first in years. "You're terrible at poker," she said, claiming my chips. "I'm finally free," I replied, and I meant it completely. At 11:45 p.m., Mrs. Chen reached out to James. Emily had pulled into my driveway in her Mercedes, just sitting there, not trying to come in, not throwing a fit, just sitting there, staring at the house like she was hoping the lights might wink back at her with forgiveness. Mrs. Chen noticed Emily was glued to her chair for a solid hour. By the time Emily left at about 1 a.m., it was like she'd aged years in just those few hours. On the night of March 16th, Emily had gone through a whirlwind. She found out she lost access to $2.3 million in assets. There was a hidden $500,000 debt no one mentioned. Discovered Brandon had gambled away what they saved. Realized she didn't truly own her house. And worse, that her mom had been aware of everything for a while. James asked if I felt guilty about the recordings. Honestly, my only regret was not hitting the record button sooner. Sunday morning, March 17th, felt bizarre. Emily was at my office, pacing around for a good 2 hours. Security tapes caught her pressing the intercom repeatedly, kind of like when a kid keeps hitting the elevator button, hoping it'll work faster. She was calling up employees using an old company directory she swiped years ago. After her third call, Jake put her on block. The rest of the folks just didn't pick up. By noon, she found herself over at Austin Bergstrom International, the airport where we used to drop her off for college trips or hug her welcome after her honeymoon. Now, she was prowling around like a detective, trying to sniff out any hints about me leaving. TSA wasn't about to hand over passenger lists, and American Airlines wasn't going to chat without a legal reason. She tried the whole family emergency angle, but they found everything to be locked down. Someone mentioned James had security footage from the airport. When Emily heard that, her face dropped. Her Uber rides that afternoon, her last ones before her account got shut down, painted a picture of desperation winding around Austin. Robert's Golf Club told her access denied. Morton's Steakhouse, the spot for big celebrations, no sign of Mr. Mitchell. Even my go-to barber shop on South Congress shuttered, as it was a Sunday. She stood outside, staring in like my haircut leftovers might tell her something. Come Monday, March 18th, Emily got thrown into the deep end of legal lingo. She hit up 4 different law firms, each giving her the same bad news. Interested looks turned to pity as they looked through her documents. "This case is locked tight," said one. "You'll need $10,000 up front," another pointed out. "Got money on hand?" a third asked. The last one simply shook his head, offering no solution. Later that day, she blew up on social media, storming into the dealership on Research Boulevard, demanding answers from Jake Martinez. Jake, who stands at 6'4" and is a former Marine, didn't even blink while she went off about kidnapping, elder abuse, and theft. When she chucked her coffee at the glass door, it just drew customers to record the spectacle on their phones. The coffee stayed smeared on the glass for 3 days. Jake let it be, standing on principle. Brandon's mom left me a voicemail at 5 p.m., sounding like any worried mom would. "Mr. Mitchell, Brandon's been MIA since Saturday night. Emily says you've taken him. This might sound crazy, but can you help us find our son?" On Tuesday, March 19th. On came the real creditors. Not the bank type in suits, but 2 guys dressed sharply in Italian leather. They knocked politely, spoke softly, handed over a business card with nothing more than a number, and left a quiet but clear message of what could happen next without any threats. Emily tried reaching Brandon 47 times, but his phone stayed off since Saturday. That afternoon, her Instagram stories, quickly captured by her sorority sisters, showed her visit to a pawn shop. She sold designer bags worth $30,000 for a mere $8,000, parted with jewelry valued at $50,000, except her wedding ring, for $15,000, and Brandon's leftover watches, originally worth $40,000, fetched another $12,000. She was still a daunting $465,000 short. Margaret finally took Emily's call that evening, making sure everything was recorded legally since she knew I'd want to hear it eventually. Over the phone, Emily's voice sounded small, like a little girl's. "Did you know, Mom?" she asked about Brandon's gambling since 6 months ago. "Why didn't you tell me?" A silence hung between them, and Margaret finally said, "Would you have listened?" Another pause. Emily then brought up needing money, and Margaret replied bluntly, "So did I. Remember during the divorce your insistence on me being independent." The call ended with Emily's sobs echoing as Margaret hung up. So, come Wednesday, March 20th, Emily strutted into James's office wearing the same chic outfit she had shown off on her Instagram from her Cabo trip the week before. James couldn't help but note the irony, jotting it down in his notes. This was the same meeting room where I'd once put my name on a dotted line, and the exact chair where Brandon spun his tales. James didn't sugarcoat anything for Emily. He laid it all out as plain as could be. The power of attorney signed before her emergency, the path of the house deed, her signature from 2020 that she seemingly hadn't read past page 2. He showed her the evidence that every dollar was considered a gift, not a payback, and Brandon's promissory note with his unmistakable signature. Emily's voice trembled with desperation as she cried, "But he's my dad. He must help me." James, unyielding, responded, "Legally, he doesn't have to." She asked about help for the grandkids, only to find out that the trust funds in their names were locked until they turned 18. Emily tried to cry elder abuse, but Brandon was just 62 and left on his own with all his wits about him. James, perhaps accidentally, flipped open Brandon's credit report on his tablet. It hit Emily like a ton of bricks, staring at the mess before her. $500,000 lost to gambling, $200,000 borrowed through loans she never knew existed, $100,000 in secret credit card debts, and a failed try at a second mortgage on her place due to ownership issues. Quietly, James slid an envelope her way. Inside was a $10,000 cashier's check and a note I'd written by hand. "For a fresh start, Dad." Emily tore it in halves, and they fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. She asked if another would come, but there wouldn't be. Ever. Over in Costa Rica, I'd been having a blast learning Spanish from the kids on the beach. They nicknamed me Roberto El Rico as I stumbled over their words. My blood pressure had dropped by 20 points, and I was sleeping soundly for 8 hours each night. I hadn't thought about Emily for 2 days until Margaret brought her up. That Wednesday night, James filled me in, saying, "Emily left my office by noon today. We've got footage of her sitting in the lobby right up until the building nearly closed at 9 p.m. The guard said she asked if you ever mentioned her. He fibbed, saying you did and that you spoke kindly of her. She thanked him and then left." That night in Costa Rica, I dreamed of teaching Emily to ride her bike again, but this time, as I released her, she managed to pedal away, slowly vanishing from view. Then, on April 3rd, the article popped up in my inbox from the Austin American-Statesman. It said, "Local businessman missing after financial scandal." Brandon Carter, 38, was last seen on March 19th. His wife had filed a missing persons report, and the cops found no signs of anything suspicious. His car was parked at the airport's long-term lot, with a ticket to Vegas he never used. By April 5th, creditors paid another visit to Emily's condo, more insistent this time, as noted in a police report she filed. They left her a picture from back in February with Brandon at the casino, chips scattered around, owning up to $500,000 in debt. Emily tried getting a restraining order, but the judge asked about the unpaid cash and turned her down. That weekend, her garage sale became quite the neighborhood event. Posts circulating on the local Facebook group by James's investigator painted a grim picture. "Moving sale, everything must go." they announced. Furniture that once hosted charity events was now for sale. Brandon's custom-fitted golf clubs went for a mere $200. Their wedding china, a complete Waterford crystal set, sold for $50. Her wedding dress, still preserved in acid-free tissue, gathered no offers. A neighbor commented simply, "Sad." A year had passed since then. Not so long ago, she had a charity gala for autism right there, raising $50,000. By early April, Emily had been blitzing the job market in Austin, sending out resumes to 47 different places over 2 weeks, tracked on LinkedIn. Interior design firms pointed to her lengthy employment gap, and retail places deemed her too qualified. Eventually, she landed a job at Nordstrom, coincidentally the same place where she'd once splurged thousands every month. Her starting pay was $15 an hour, plus commission. Life certainly had its own quirky sense of humor. Then, on April 15th, as she returned home, she found an eviction notice taped to her condo door. She was 3 months behind on the mortgage, and Brandon, who had been managing the finances, hadn't mentioned the mounting debt. Her monthly payment was $4,000, and she was $13,500 behind, including late fees. She had until May 15th to pay up or vacate. The news smacked her in the face as she walked in from her first day at the new job, still sporting a name tag she used to overlook on others. The divorce paperwork showed up on April 18th, feeling more like the end of a business transaction than a marriage. Emily was blamed for abandonment, and Brandon needed to be served, but nobody could track him down. The judge allowed a notice to be published in 3 newspapers, which cost $500 that Emily didn't have. To prepare for court, she used her Nordstrom employee discount to buy a suit, her first clothing purchase with her own money in 7 years. While Emily was piecing her life back together, I started a fresh chapter in Costa Rica. My days took on a rhythm I hadn't felt in ages. Waking to howler monkeys, savoring coffee with a view of the Pacific, and taking morning swims in the crystal-clear ocean. Lunches at Manuel's beach bar were blissfully free of talk about business or daughters. The local kids called me Roberto El Rico, Robert the Rich, and I taught them English in exchange for Spanish lessons. The adults invited me to dinners focused on simple topics like football, fishing, and the weather, with the only request being someone to pass the salt. Margaret took up painting, and her attempts at seascapes were so comically bad that they made us laugh together, a first since Emily turned 16 and began seeing us as resources rather than parents. Our relationship wasn't romantic but peaceful, like 2 shipwreck survivors sharing a raft. My doctor in San Jose was surprised by my transformation. My blood pressure had dropped by 30 points. I'd lost 20 pounds effortlessly, and I was off 3 medications. "What changed?" he asked, with his accented English. "Everything and nothing," I responded. "I quit bankrolling everyone else's life and decided to live my own." On April 25th, TMZ broke a story. The missing Texas businessman had been spotted in Mexico. Brandon Carter was working under an alias at a car rental in Juarez. The photo showed him thinner, his wedding ring missing. Extraditing him for civil debts seemed unlikely. Emily simply wrote, "Good riddance," in the comments. Then, on April 27th, Emily finally checked out the airport storage. Manuel told me about her discovery, memories from her childhood, photo albums she thought were gone forever, her grandmother's jewelry she had assumed was lost in the divorce, and a $50,000 savings bond in her name, set to mature in a year. There was a note in my handwriting. "For when you remember who you were before money mattered. Dad." Emily emailed me on April 28th through James. Her message was carefully penned. "Mr. O. Walker, please let my father know I found the storage unit. I understand now. I'm sorry. I'm working at Nordstrom, surviving. Maybe that's the lesson. Don't tell him I asked, but is he happy?" James wanted to know if he should reply. On April 29th, as I watched the sun set on the beach and Margaret read next to me, I thought back to the guitarist from my first night here. Emily was finding the box that changed everything. I told James over the phone, "Tell her yes, I'm happy, and let her know the bond was her mother's idea. Anything else? Say I'll be here when she's ready to visit, but she has to get here on her own." That night, I watched Costa Rican families enjoying the beach together. 3 generations chatting, no one glued to their phones. They might be considered poor by American standards, but they were rich in a way that truly counts. Emily texted James saying, "Thanks for telling me. Maybe by Christmas if I save enough." It was the first time in 5 years she'd talked about saving for anything. On April 30th, Manuel's band played at the beach bar. They dedicated a song to Roberto El Rico, not an Eagles hit, but a local tune about a man who found treasure by giving everything away. Margaret translated it for me. She'd seen it over and over, but this was something else, something real. Later, she shot a message to James saying it was the first time she really felt like she earned her own cash. No gimmicks, no leaning on her last name or fulfilling any expectations, just plain hard work. She had this draft on her phone that she never sent. "Dad, pulled in $300 tonight just by myself. I know you won't see this. I know you're not here anymore, but I wanted you to know. I'm beginning to understand." She deleted it, but the phone company still had a trace. Meanwhile, in Costa Rica, the rainy season was underway. I was teaching English at the local school, unpaid. The kids called me Teacher Roberto. No one around had a clue about my money troubles. Margaret painted these awful landscapes, but somehow tourists bought them for $20 apiece, and she handed it to the school. Most evenings we sat down for supper, just us, sticking to the basics: rice, fish, plantains. It was better than any posh meal at a country club. James shot over a last note. "Emily's working 2 jobs now, living in a tiny apartment, just managing." I replied, "Stop tracking her story. She needs to sort this out alone now." As May 31st rolled into midnight, Emily was starting another shift at Denny's. With the Memorial Day folks coming in, she tied her apron, grabbed her notepad, and headed over to a loud group of frat guys, the type Brandon would hang with. "Welcome to Denny's. What can I start you off with?" One of them recognized her. "Emily. Emily Carter from the country club." She didn't let it rattle her. "Yep, that's me," she replied coolly. "So, what'll it be?" Later, James said that was a defining moment, serving pancakes to folks who knew her from her old life. That's when Emily stopped being just my daughter and started to become her own person. By June, the brutal Austin heat kicked in, and Emily found her rhythm. Nordstrom customers specifically looked for her, drawn in by her genuine help rather than judgment. The nurses on her night shift at Denny's tipped well, since she always remembered their coffee orders without them having to ask. No sugar for Beth, extra cream for Susan, and decaf for Maria, who was cutting back. One co-worker from Nordstrom told James Emily went from wearing a size 10 to a size 4, and it wasn't due to dieting, but from covering miles in the store and carrying trays all night, eating only what her budget allowed. Her cheekbones looked like they could cut glass, but her eyes now had a kind of wisdom they didn't have before. Sundays meant routine, laundromat at 6 a.m., sharp to beat the rush, grabbing groceries at the Asian markets on North Lamar, where you could stretch your dollar, then meal prepping in her tiny kitchen with its one working burner. Surprisingly, she started going to the library a lot, diving into books on financial literacy, scribbling notes like she was back in college. On Tuesday, June 10th, Emily checked her mail by the lobby. Mostly bills and credit card offers she knew she no longer qualified for. But this time, there was a cream envelope with no return address stamped from Costa Rica. Her hands shook when she recognized my handwriting. Forgetting patience, she collapsed onto the lobby stairs to read it then and there. It was 3 pages of the neat handwriting she knew from birthday cards and checks over the years. The letter began, Hey Emily, here I am, chilling on a gorgeous beach in Costa Rica, jotting down a few thoughts. There's this little girl playing nearby who totally reminds me of you at 7, full of guts, curious about everything, and thinking the world should just do what she wants. But here's a twist. She knows how to show gratitude too. I can't really blame you for how you turned out. I kinda made you that way. Whenever you shed tears, I handed over some cash. You wanted something? I made sure you got it. Thought I was showing love, but really I was just holding you back. Your mom said you're busting your butt with 2 jobs, and honestly, that's awesome. Real work teaches stuff an inheritance never could. Every buck you earn represents time, sweat, and sacrifice, something my handouts could never match. When I come back, I won't be the same guy. I was more like a walking checkbook than a real dad. But I do want to come back to see who you're becoming. That storage unit key you found? Your mom's idea. She thought you needed something tangible to hold on to. The bond matures in April 2026. By then, you'll either be living independently or hoping for a savior. Either way, you'll discover more about who you are. Love you, always have, but love without respect is just pity. Earn my respect, Emily, and more importantly, earn your own. P.S. Grandma would have been so psyched to hear you're working at Denny's. She was a waitress when she met Grandpa. I never knew that. I felt too embarrassed to admit it back then, and even now I feel a pang of shame. Emily kept that letter tucked in her apron pocket all week. A co-worker at Denny's mentioned seeing her glance at it during breaks, sometimes tearing up in the bathroom. Those weren't angry tears. They ran much deeper. Emily began opening up to her colleagues, genuinely asking about their families, what was going on in their lives, and actually listened to them. Then she rang up Margaret, upset about the grandma news, demanding why she wasn't informed. Margaret told her straight, "You never asked about anyone's hardships, only their wins. What else am I missing? Everything meaningful?" This change in Emily shone through in her performance review at Nordstrom. She became their best associate. Customers now felt connected to her because she got what it meant to be saving up for something significant. She learned about sacrifice in ways she hadn't before, which led to her promotion to department lead at $8 an hour. It was the first promotion she earned fair and square, not one that was handed to her. On June 25th, Emily penned a response after 5 days and heaps of drafts. Margaret later shared bits and pieces of it with others. "Dad," Emily began, "it's 3 a.m., and I'm writing this squeezed between shifts. My feet hurt, my back aches, but I've never felt more alive. Not the champagne and shopping kind of happy, but the kind where I've earned this sandwich, where customers request me by name, where I pay my own rent. Truly happy. I was furious when you left. How could you just go? But now I get it. You didn't just ditch me, you saved me from becoming something awful. Brandon's out of the picture. Good riddance. He mirrored the worst parts of me. We were 2 parasites feeding off our own entitlement, and when the well ran dry, so did we. I don't want your money anymore. It's not a rebellious move. Sure, I'll need the bond to eventually shift to a nicer place, but I want it to kickstart a new chapter, not bail me out. When you're ready to return, I want you to see me, the real me, not the girl lost in designer clothes and endless demands. P.S. I held on to one thing from the past, our graduation photo. You seem so proud, and I want to earn that look again. I received the letter just as Independence Day was rolling around. Talk about timing. I read it while sitting on the beach, Margaret leaning over my shoulder to peek. She gets it, Margaret noted. Understanding and actually living it are 2 different things, I shot back. She needs time. How much time? Margaret asked. How long did it take you to change? I answered, I'm still in the process. Exactly, she said. By the time the clock ticked to 11 p.m. on June 30th, Emily was just starting her shift. An older guy she knew well, the type who preferred dining solo, made his usual order and then tossed in a new comment. You look like you've shed a bit of weight or a burden. Emily's smile was heartfelt. I'm figuring out how to take care of my own stuff, instead of hoping others do it for me. He left behind a $20 tip on an $8 tab, along with a little note. For your education fund, from one fellow traveler. That night sparked something in me. I made up my mind to return in August. Not to play the hero or test her, but to get a real sense of who Emily was turning into now that she had to stand on her own feet. I touched down in Austin on the morning of August 15th, 2025, at the very same gate I'd left from back in March. Those 5 months had stretched out like 5 long years. Margaret stayed in Costa Rica saying, "This is your journey to wrap up." I skipped the fancy wheels and went with a basic sedan instead of the flashy car Robert Mitchell would have picked. Drove past my dealerships, they were running smoothly without a hitch, a good thing, and then rolled by Emily's old condo, now buzzing with a new family enjoying their debt-free life. I holed up at a Hampton Inn, steering clear of the Four Seasons, savoring comfort without the frills. Gave James a call. "I'm in town." He responded, "She has no clue." Right. I wanted a peek at her real world, not some show she'd put on for me. She's at Nordstrom till 6. By 4 p.m., I found myself at Barton Creek Mall's Nordstrom, keeping a low profile. Emily was crouched down, assisting an elderly woman with her shoes, so tenderly, so thoughtfully. Gone was the old Emily who might have passed off the duty. She had shed some weight, appeared stronger, and her movements felt purposeful, lacking any hint of entitlement. Her outfit was simple and sweet. A practical ponytail had replaced salon-stylized looks. Free of makeup, her face shone with an untouched beauty that was new to me. At 5:30, I shuffled up like a regular customer needing shoes. She caught sight of me and froze, the word "Dad" barely reaching her lips. "Hello, Emily," I greeted warmly. We both stood there, the changes of these past 5 months hanging in the air. Then she laughed, a genuine release from any past bitterness. Quite the scene, us shopping at Nordstrom, me who hadn't picked out his own clothes in ages. Funny how life flips upside down. She was busy with her job, so I blended in with the crowd. As we explored the shoes, our talk was cautious. "You look different," I observed. "I am different. Living with less, a surprising kind of diet," she chuckled. "Just life," I replied. "Sure feels like the same thing when you're used to living the dream." She rang up the shoes, quietly slipping in an employee discount, a subtle pat on her back. "I clock out at 6 and I've got another shift at Denny's starting at 11 Sue. How about grabbing some dinner in the meantime?" she proposed. "Eating out's not really on the cards." "How about I cook?" I suggested. She paused before giving me her address. "It's far from what you're used to." "And so am I now," I returned. By 6:30, I was climbing up to her apartment. She'd swapped out her work clothes for a faded pair of jeans and a second-hand t-shirt, both simple and tidy. Her studio was small, yet neat as a pin. One chair, one stool. She offered me the chair. "Not much," she mentioned. "It's yours, which makes it everything," I assured her. There on the wall was an old graduation picture of us, and on a small shelf was my letter, lying next to library books on financial planning. I put together a pasta dish with the groceries she had, nothing fancy, but definitely fresh. Watching me cook took her down memory lane. "Mom says you're teaching English in Costa Rica? Volunteering free of charge?" she remarked. "The best things I've been part of lately haven't cost a thing," I responded. We shared pasta at her little table, plastic plates and all, and it felt more genuine than any fancy dinner I'd ever been to. Out of the blue, she laid it out there. "I hated you." "I know," I answered. "No, I really hated you. Even wished you were dead," she pressed. "I know." "Why did you leave me with nothing?" she questioned. "How could I leave you with everything?" "It was bringing us both down," I explained. We sat in a thick, necessary silence, the kind that didn't unsettle but soothed. By 9 o'clock, she needed to start prepping for her shift at Denny's. I handed her an envelope. "This isn't a handout, it's a chance," I explained. Inside was a $5,000 check along with a contract. "What's this about? A business proposal?" she inquired. "You'll be working with me, not like at the car dealerships. We're starting something new, teaching young adults about financial literacy. You've got experience from both sides," I told her. She examined the contract carefully. It promised a reasonable salary with raises based on performance, no freebies. "This isn't a free ride, it's a real deal. If it fails, you're out, even if you're my daughter," I warned her. "And what if I pull it off?" she asked. "Then you'll have achieved it by yourself," I reassured her. By 10:30, she was on her way to Denny's. We hugged goodbye, a genuine embrace filled with meaning. "I'll review the contract again tomorrow," she promised. "Read it 3 times. That's another skill to develop," I advised. "I'm learning," she nodded. "We both are," I affirmed. A month later, Emily accepted the position but continued working her shifts at Denny's on weekends for another 6 months. It was her safety net, a wise move. Her initial workshop attracted 12 participants. A year later, she was speaking at universities. After 2 years, she was developing curricula for school districts. She didn't even cash in the bond when it matured, using her own savings for a down payment on a house. Brandon never returned. Word was, he married a wealthy widow in Cancun. History repeating itself, but no longer our concern. When Thanksgiving came, Emily hosted us in her snug studio. Margaret brought along some side dishes, and I provided the wine. We all gathered around her coffee table, seated on the floor. Lifting her glass of water, Emily proposed a toast. "To family," Margaret chimed in. "To all we've learned," I concluded with, "to new beginnings." Our glasses met, plastic and glass clashing in a perfectly imperfect symphony. All the money I'd accumulated couldn't compare to the treasure in that room, the genuine respect of a daughter, not something given, but earned. It dawned on me that sometimes the best gift is letting someone discover their own path.